You're listening to Two Babies in a Business, a podcast where Peter and I chat about all the things that we chat about anyways, in car rides, on the couch, and in all the different places, which sounded inappropriate, but really isn't, because when we're in bed, we just sleep right away. Anyways, today we have a special guest, Emily, our producer extraordinaire. Emily, you tapped me on the shoulder last week virtually and said, Christina, the boys episode, very cute, but there's probably a goals part 2 that we need to unpack. And that is why you're the producer, Emily.
Well, there you go. Thank you for that lovely introduction. It's always so much fun when I get to come and be on these episodes. So thank you for having me. I think, for 7 years old, there was a lot of wisdom in that episode. So, I kind of want to unpack some of that with you. And I guess I'll kick things off by asking the two of you, what does goal setting look like with the boys as a family between the two of you? How do you kind of make that a priority for you folks over there?
And I guess maybe I'll start and say that first of all, we are an EOS company and we are also an EOS family. So we're fairly formal when it comes. So for those who don't know, EOS stands for Entrepreneurial Operating System, which comes from the book Traction, which is a great book. So if you're an entrepreneur, you should read Traction and consider following Traction as your I guess your entrepreneurial operating system. But anyways, we kind of went all in on traction this year in our company and then came across some traction related stuff for your family. So there's sort of a similar model for the family where you sort of write down some 10-year goals. So really kind of the way the model works is you kind of start off obviously with your vision and mission and values. And then you kind of really get into what's your 10-year goal, and then you work backwards. If your 10-year goal is X, then your 3-year goal must be X to achieve that, and then you go back to 1-year goal, and then you go into some more kind of quarterly rocks, which are so the whole system is designed to kind of break down big goals into smaller pieces to help you achieve those goals. So yeah, that's kind of how we organize our lives now. I don't know, Christina, if you have anything to add to them.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's like I've talked about this before. Like, I always have trouble setting long-term goals. It's just the way I think is very short-term and to-do list. So for me, I like the traction and EOS family planner from just like hey, what are we working on this quarter? What are we not? Obviously at this age, it's very like Peter and I not dictate, but like dictate what's going on, but we always save a place for the boys. So Peter and I have the conversation. We'll have our business meeting as business owners and talk about, okay, what's the rocks for the quarter? What do we need to do, and bring that to a leadership meeting. And then after that, we do our family one. So then Peter and I have that conversation and we leave blanks for the boys. So Bartek gets to fill in what is one thing he wants to accomplish this quarter. Jacob, the same thing, and go from there. I think too, Peter, we're very goal oriented in the way we talk. Like I think a few weekends ago, we said, okay, everyone name 2 things they want to accomplish this weekend and do. And we wrote them all down on a piece of paper. And, there were a couple we didn't do, but it was like a discussion why we didn't do them. But like, I just think we it's how we kind of talk. I don't know. Maybe that's just who we are. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things I'll say that I guess from a children perspective, what really fills their tank is actually when we did that exercise, like, okay, what do we all want to accomplish this weekend? I think often what parents do is like, okay, we'll do what I think is important first. And then, the kids are like literally waiting all weekend. And then, maybe you get to it at the end of the weekend or maybe not. And, life of disappointment as a child, mommy and daddy issues later on. But one thing that I think is really neat is when we were like, okay, so let's like hit your goals first, kids, and then like we do their thing first, and then they're so eager to work with us on our things, right? Because our obviously mine's like clean the garage, mow the lawn, do this, do that, like it's all like dad chores or whatever. But honestly, you give them like a good hour or two in the morning on Saturday to do the thing they really wanted to do, and they're like super happy all weekend. So that'd be my one pro tip parent pro tip, if you don't want your kids with deep-seated mommy and daddy issues in their 30s, maybe put them first at least once in a while. Just throwing it out there.
We don't know if I will or not,
Well,
but
we don't know. This is a theory at this point, a working theory. We'll find out.
stay tuned.
But I could just tell the weekends where we do that, and like I'm by no means perfect on this because I obviously, as a parent, wake up and I'm like, okay, here's my 50 million tasks I want to accomplish this weekend, and it's not putting the kids first all the time. So it's just something we've started to do recently, and I noticed that it just brings them a lot of joy and happiness and makes them really feel fulfilled. I can tell.
And their stuff is fun.
Yeah, there's like the fun stuff, right? But that's the thing, right? Like you grow up your whole life, like, okay, you got to do this. This is like how I grew up. My dad's like, you got to do the work first and the enjoyment later. And it's like, well, what the fuck's the point of life if it's all just about working and enjoying it later? I don't know. Like, how about just like enjoy your life a little bit and work? Like at the end of the day, the thing doesn't get dusted or cleaned. It's like, who cares, right? So I feel like this is we can have a whole conversation about how generational priorities have changed over generations. But anyways, that's a whole nother topic.
Oh boy.
I was just thinking, if we were ever to do Two Babies in a Business podcast merch, dad chores would be a great t-shirt. That'd be amazing. Nice. Dad chores.
Nice. Yeah.
But I like the way that you're framing that as, these are the goals for the weekend, even if they're, have fun and whatever that looks like for the boys, but that's the goal of the weekend. I think that's a good one. And it's one that we don't necessarily always prioritize, regardless of whether you're 7 or 70. So I think framing it that way is great, because not only do the kids see, we want to enjoy life as a goal, but then it also in a way holds the two of you accountable. Whereas, if we don't do the fun thing, we don't accomplish the goal.
It's all about balance, right? Like,
yeah,
like
100%.
Do the fun thing and then do maybe the least fun thing and then maybe do the, you know what I mean? And you can go back and forth. And by the time you know it, the day's over and you've accomplished a lot and life is good.
Yeah.
How about you, Emily? How do you do your goal setting?
None of it is nearly that structured. Actually, that's not entirely true. I was always the kid who would come home from school, because we did a ton of goal setting when we were in school, and that was great. It taught us a lot of really valuable, skills in terms of goal setting and that sort of thing. What drove me a little bit crazy is it would kind of stop there, and then, our teachers in our school wouldn't really help us with the follow through, which I can appreciate. I'm not going to place blame there. As a teacher, you've got enough on your plate, but it was just frustrating because you never got to see the follow through. And so then it made the whole task itself seem a little bit meaningless. And so then I would go home and I'd complain to my mom about this whole goal setting thing. And she would be like, well, you need to learn to set goals and that. And so because of that whole very long experience that I had while I was in school, I had this very friction oriented relationship with goal setting. And then over the last few years, I've set pretty much the same goal every year, not accomplished it. And we can talk about, the why of setting your goals. And I think your why has to be really meaningful, or you won't actually follow through on your goal. But this year I've set probably about 10 goals that I have wanted to accomplish. And I think I've done 3 of them so far. So we've got a lot of catching up to do before the end of the year, but that's okay.
Last quarter, everything happens in the last quarter.
Yeah, there you go. Right. You really stick to your guns and then you get it done. But I wouldn't say there's I guess the biggest problem with my goal setting in the last few years has really been from a very long game perspective. Like you, Christina, I struggle with it just because I didn't really know where I was going. There was no, I want to have this house and I want to live in this city and I want to make this much money and I want this job title. I've never really been that way, which I don't think is a bad thing, but it doesn't necessarily lend itself always to setting these really specific goals. But now that I have a better sense of what I want in the next 5 years, I feel like I can set some better goals.
Yeah. I think people kind of often get overwhelmed by goals because they think too far in advance and then it becomes kind of nebulous and kind of like meaningless, right? And like, yeah, I have some long-term goals, but like, it's like I just want to be happy every day. I mean, generally speaking, and like, you know what I mean? There's a few things I want to accomplish around financial stuff, and you know what I mean? Like it's like pretty like simple stuff, really. I think keep it simple. It would be kind of my advice on that.
Totally. Actually, that does lead me to, I wanted to talk a little bit more about EOS, because I think that working backwards model is probably really helpful. Because then if you're kind of looking at that timeline going backwards, you can say, oh, well, that 10-year goal actually isn't really all that realistic. So let's break it down a little bit more. In terms of, a tool like EOS, the two of you always have all of these great resources. If you are starting off as a business, if you're already well entrenched as a business, but you're looking for more, goal setting, tools, resources, that sort of thing, where do you find these tools? Where can people go?
Yeah, I feel like so we're part of the WSI Digital Marketing, Global Digital Marketing Network. So honestly, a lot of the main books that we sort of follow actually all came out of Global Convention or WSI Global Convention. So I feel like we got lucky a little bit in terms of our network is really good at, sort of sharing and that type of thing.
Like, I think that's a good point, Peter, in terms of like have a network. Because I
Yes.
think that like as a business owner, I think especially for the first few years, I felt very alone in terms of like I don't have a colleague anymore that you like commiserate with, like, oh, that was a crazy meeting, right? Like you are working, you are doing, you are whatever. And I think, what is I think one of the most valuable things for me personally in terms of the WSI network is, I have a call every 2 months with, 6 or 7 individuals who have the same job title as me, who have the same business as I do, who are, in all different parts of North America. And we're just trying to figure it out. And we can complain and we can celebrate and we can go, I do it this way. Oh, I do it this way, and help each other with resourcing and templates. And I think it's that like when you're first starting out and you're an entrepreneur, you don't have anyone like you really feel like you do. So like find a network and like, I think like Peter said, we were lucky that WSI was a thing for us, but even, I have some business owner friends that before I owned a business were probably not as tight as we are now, because all of a sudden we have this really big commonality that we can share and talk about and whatever. I think don't go it alone. Sorry to interrupt you, Peter.
No, that's okay. Yeah. I mean, we also have a business coach, which I appreciate. Not every new business can afford to have a business coach. So that's sort of, put that aside. But our business coach also recommends resources to us and uses these models and uses these different books. And I mean, this is how we build our business. And so, so I think, I think it's sort of find a group of like-minded people or find like-minded people who are all going through similar things, and you'll be amazed what with what you learn. And or for the free version is podcasting. I love listening to podcasts, and podcasts have, right, there's tons of podcasts for entrepreneurs. There's tons of good resources in those podcasts. There's tons of books that get recommended, right? So like I think that's a great, if you don't have resources, don't have money, don't have time, you can always throw in a podcast when you're taking your dog for a walk, going grocery shopping, driving. I mean, I'm listening to podcasts all the time in every free second I have to further educate myself and to further learn about what's going on in the world. So,
And I think listen to it again. So like I listened to Traction many years ago and it was like, this makes sense for my business. Okay, yeah. And then I re-listened to it again this summer, and like there were all of these places where it was like, oh, okay, this is how this makes sense, or oh, I forgot about that. Or like I think don't just shelf the book once it's done and think you're never going to listen to it again. It's like I think I probably will listen to Traction every 2 years now, just because I think it helped me go, oh, these little things I'm feeling, like I'm not alone. And 2, it's like, oh yeah, I used to do that and then I got away from it. Or, oh, that didn't make sense to me at the time. Now it does. I have an example that, is living, breathing, and I get it. So, don't listen once and forget about it, but like go back and keep yourself fresh.
Nice. I wanted to touch on probably one of my favorite parts of the episode with Jacob and Bartek, and not in these words, but Bartek kind of pointed out that one of the most important parts of goal setting is being realistic, making sure that you're focused, and having that accountability piece, in terms of, you know, not having too many goals and then making sure that you tell people so that they can hold you accountable. So just wondering, where do you guys think Bartek found this excellent wisdom of his?
He's a very wise kid.
Bartek is an old soul.
Yeah.
You
I
know?
will say though that I believe strongly. So I post a lot on social media related to my goals and what I'm trying to accomplish, and I'm pretty transparent on social media about those things and my working, especially when it comes to physical and working out and stuff like that. And it's interesting because I completely do that 100%, the most selfish thing possible. It's completely for me. But I get people being like, "Oh, you've motivated me to work out and you've encouraged me," and which is awesome, which is a great side benefit. But you know, like to your point, or to Bartek's, I guess, point is like being transparent and being sort of like putting it out there in the world. Um, Sort of puts it out there in the world, and then it doesn't create like nobody's going to hold you accountable per se, but it sort of creates a little bit more accountability for yourself, and I
Yeah.
think that's not a bad thing, right? So yeah.
I think we're really this probably isn't surprising. Like we are very open with our kids in terms of the conversations we have. Like, you know, obviously Peter and I talk about business when we're driving in the car, and you know, probably the kids are in the car too, and we're trying to hammer out an issue, or we're talking about a client, or we're talking about a process problem, and obviously the kids are listening and they ask questions, and they, you know, I think too, they almost keep us accountable, right? Like in terms of, oh, you're talking about that again? It's like, oh, well, we better solve this problem. So we start talking about it, or like, oh, like I think this. Like, and again, it's little kids, whatever, and it's not, we're not basing big decisions off of everything, but like they see that we're openly talking through things. They see that we're having these conversations together. They feel like they can come to us and talk about it. So I'm hoping we've, you know, maybe by accident set that example. I mean, I think I'm very vocal too about I am athletic, but I am the least athletic in this family. So I set a lot of goals around like, I'm going to do mountain biking class so I can keep up with you guys. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. I need you to encourage me, and you know, you're going to hang out with just dad this evening because I got to go do this, or you know, you got to make space for mom to do that. So I think they understand the like, we need to all work together. One of our family values is no man left behind.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that is one that they, you know, there are some values they don't remember, but I feel like that is one that they remember quite well. And yeah.
I just think that too, on that note, in terms of being transparent and sort of letting everybody around you know, it sort of helps. One, there's an accountability there, but also too, like I never knew my parents' goals. I never knew, and so it's like, all I knew is my dad was a workaholic, and it's like, well, and now talking to him, it was like, oh yeah, I got a lot of value out of the community I built in my business, and it's like, I think I would have understood my dad better and differently and had different conversations growing up had that been more of a conversation. Because I'll just say this on this. It's like my dad always said, "Oh, I just do this all for my kids. Everything's for you guys. Everything's for you guys." And it's like that's a lie. And no. And like I understand the sentiment, but the reality is you also got stuff out of this. You also like being at work because those are your colleagues and your people and your community and your whatever. And it's like there's nothing to be ashamed of there, and it's okay. And when and it's like when your dad's like, "Oh, I just work for my kids," and the kids are like, "Well, I just want to have time with my dad." That creates resentment.
Yeah.
Where it's like, hey, I do this because it brings me joy and it brings me whatever and it fulfills me and whatever. So it's like I use, I'm not going to use work as an example because I feel like our work balance is pretty good, but like I go away with my friends camping and hiking sometimes, and that's important time for me, and I'm very transparent to my kids about that, and like that's a goal for me, is just to connect with friends and to have a social community to be friends with and whatever, and just being transparent about it, I guess is I think hopefully, again, I'm just trying to do as many things in my life to reduce the amount of mommy and daddy issues that our kids have and resentment.
I think to conclude, I'll say I think that transparency, sharing with your kids kind of why you're doing certain things is really important, and just showing them what you're doing, period, whether it's on purpose or by accident, is a great place to start. You know, when I look at some of my other friends who are struggling professionally, they don't have certain, you know, whether it's networking or goal setting skills that I do. And when I look back at why I have them, it's never because my mom sat me down and said, hey, let's set goals and I'm going to introduce you to my whole network and blah, 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 blah. She just accidentally showed me while I was growing up. And obviously politics was a huge part of that, because you just grow a network that way, whether you want to or not, or you're a recluse. But it's really hard to do that while you're in politics. You probably won't be very successful. But either way, all that to say, showing your kids what you do, why you do it, how you do it, whether it's intentional or not, always a great way to go. So
I think so too. Yeah. Agreed.
nice.
Well, thanks, Emily. Thanks for bringing some sense to goals. Because remember, if you want to go golfing, and you don't have a golf bag,
You need a golf bag.
A golf bag.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Two Babies in a Business. To learn more, visit ciprcommunications.com or catch us on our socials at CIPRcoms.